All right, I think we are on air. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CMX AMA with Adriana Cerundolo. Adriana, first of all, I should have checked. Did I say your name right or did I completely butcher it?
It was pretty good, I have to say. You can also say it the Italian way, Adriana Cerundolo, but Adriana Cerundolo is also fine.
Nice. I end up writing the names of all the speakers so many times that I have everyone's name exactly memorized. It's really amazing.
You're doing a great job.
Well, we're going to get this kicked off. Google Hangouts just let me know that we can broadcast for up to 8 hours, so we're going to aim for 8. We're gonna aim for about 20 minutes here with Adriana. Adriana is the program manager of the Google Developer Groups program, which is an incredibly massive program of events around the world. I believe the latest stats I saw were 101 countries, 574 chapters, insane number of events. I don't even remember that number.
It's a lot of events.
So we're going to dive in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Evan Hamilton. I'm Director of Community at CMX. And we're super excited because not only is Adriana joining us today, but she is joining us to speak at CMX Summit, which is on November 1st and 2nd in San Francisco. She'll be talking in the developer track alongside some other fantastic community builders. So I hope we see you there. And yes, we will be releasing a small number of discounted tickets during this AMA. So stay tuned. So Adriana, most important question first. Mm-hmm. You just got back from Burning Man.
I did.
Did you see David Spinks and what was he wearing?
Unfortunately, I did not. It's funny, apparently there were quite a few celebrities out on the playa, and I somehow missed all of them. I've been seeing some photos come through on my Facebook feed and Twitter and stuff about different celebrities that were out there, but apparently I was in my own world. So that's kind of what Burning Man's all about.
That's true. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that because, I think it's easy to mock Burning Man from a distance, and I'll confess I've never been, and I've probably mocked at times, but it seems like from a community building perspective, there's absolutely something to be learned there. So I'm curious, what do you think we should be learning from Burning Man, or what do you think it's hard to understand from an outside perspective?
Yeah, it's very easy to mock it, and I have to say that I also mocked it a bit, or maybe just judged it before going myself, because I had heard stories and ideas around why it was so great. Like, oh, well, it's a place where you can be fully yourself and open up to your authenticity, and I'm thinking, well, why can't you just do that in your day-to-day life, right? Mm-hmm. And what I realized is being there, you leave your day-to-day, you leave the responsibilities, the accountability, or the identities that you've created for yourself in your default world, and it's this playground to just explore how am I feeling right now, and what is the type of interaction that I want to have right now, what is the experience that I want to have, and because it's so new and everything is just kind of like a clean slate there, people literally need to bring everything that they need to survive for that week together to build the world that you're living in. It becomes a really special place to do that. So from a community standpoint, what's interesting about it is that everything there that you get, if you're not bringing it yourself, you're just gifted it, or you're just sharing with people. So you can't buy drinks or really anything there except for ice and coffee, but almost at every corner there's a camp that's offering something, and what they're offering is whether it's alcohol, or whether it's just like a game room, or whatever it is, a swing to swing on. It becomes a place for you to interact. So by offering something out into the larger community, you are offering an interaction, and that's what Burning Man has been for me, is just this place to interact. So it's interesting. It's in terms of community building, it's like, what do you have to offer that you want to be your interaction point with others? And it's just an interesting question to pose, regardless of what community you're in.
Yeah. Well, and in a way, it seems like communities are kind of a magical place where you are only offering yourself, right? It's one of the few areas in a company where there's not really a lot of commerce going on, and it's all about what you give and what you get from that. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, the lights are getting dim here. It's actually for your own survival, you kind of need to rely on people out there. It's really rough conditions in terms of the dust and the windstorms, the heat, the cold at night, and there's always going to be at least a couple things that you didn't bring, that you were not prepared for, that you lost or whatnot, and so you're relying on the people around you. And having that need, that little survival reliability on others makes that community feel, it just peaks it even more, because you're realizing how important it is to be in community. And especially too, I mean, it's very easy to have kind of emotional breakdowns there, because everything is amplified, whatever's happening in your world, and it becomes so important. You realize how precious it is if you're with a camp, with a group of people, to have those relationships to hold you through that space.
Yeah, that's amazing. Someday I'll make it.
Yeah, it's an experience for sure. You need to really want it, because like I said, it can be challenging on the body and several hours in line to get in and to get out, but I think it's definitely a worthwhile experience for those that are hardy.
So I just want to encourage folks, we already have some questions from our audience we'll get to shortly, but please tweet us, use the hashtag CMX Summit, or tweet at CMX, or I believe there's a chat feature within Google Hangouts Live. Feel free to use that. We will get to your questions. Before we dive into the first question from our audience, maybe Adriana, if you could just give sort of an overview of what is the Google Developer Groups program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working with Google Developer Groups, or GDGs as we call them, for about 4 years now. Essentially, it's a global community of in-person meetups around Google Developer technologies. And all these meetups are run by volunteers, people that have stepped up and raised their hand that they want to start a community in their local city or area to bring developers and other tech enthusiasts together, learning about Google Developer technologies. So that's anything from Android to Chrome. Of course, we also allow other topics to be covered there too. They're Google relevant. But essentially, it's just a place for people to come and learn. It's a very open environment. It's welcoming. For those that are interested in developing their technical skills and to build community around that.
And I want to ask kind of a loaded question, which is, if you ran this program with employees instead of community members, how many employees would you have to hire?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's an interesting question, because I don't know if the program would really be the same if it was employees, because the whole point of GDGs is that it's run by people's innate passion for technology and desire to innovate, and that's really why Google values the program. It's reaching out to people that are just organically at the forefront of innovation, that have this interest in delving into technologies. To give you a sense of the amount of people that are in the community, we have almost 2,000 organizers worldwide across almost 600 chapters. The directory page, it kind of fluctuates in and out depending on the level of reporting that the organizers have every month. But yeah, it takes around 2,000 people to actually run these groups, and these are just the organizers, and they're reaching, you know, thousands of developers locally every month through their events. And then internally, we have around 50 people on our developer relations team that in some way, shape, or form are touching GDGs. They might not be working on GDGs full time, but they are helping support the communities locally as in-person or just Google contacts on the ground.
That's amazing. I mean, it's a massive program, and I know it didn't happen overnight.
No, it certainly didn't. It took some time to develop and evolve.
Yeah. How do you go about tackling a concept like this?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because, as is true to you know, traditional community form, the GDG concept grew out of an innate passion on the ground. It wasn't that Google said, "Hey, I think we should have a community program. How do we go about doing this?" And a bunch of people sat in a boardroom, you know, coming up with concepts. What we saw was back in was it 2011? actually 2008, it might have started as early as 2008, we had a group in Prague that organically started to bring people together around Google technologies, and it started with the brand Google Technology User Groups. They might have had actually an earlier brand before then. Dan Frank would know the complete history. We've actually talked about recently how we have to write down, like the legacy of GDGs and have a Bible, because just with like the Gospels and everything, things change depending on who's sharing the story. So we need to have a written form that's our source of truth. But regardless, we saw that both in California, in Europe, and in the Philippines, there were people that were organically coming together around Google Developer Technologies and forming communities. And then the DevRel contacts here in Mountain View got wind of this and started working with them locally and saying, hey, like what's going on here? And slowly but surely that became folded in as a supported program by Google, and then like a Google-owned brand, if you will. I mean, the brand is actually Creative Commons, but it was a brand that Google said, we're going to actually support this and get some people around and funding around. So yeah, it really started with local people's interest, and Google picked up on that and thought it was worthwhile to continue pursuing and supporting to move forward.
I love that story because I think I know I've fallen prey to the feeling that like, oh, I know better. I'll figure out the best community program, and ultimately listening to the community is always better, and they will tell you what they want and what they're willing to do. And I mean, now you have this massive, amazing program because you listen to them.
It's interesting. This is actually something that I'm continuing to learn in my own life, and I've gone through my own ups and downs with this. Because traditionally, I used to be someone that felt like I had to do everything, and if I had an idea, like I have to figure out the solution for it. And it's been a really great learning in being in community work to realize, you know what, you can actually trust other people, and if you're just an active listener and are getting feedback from other people, that will pave the way on its own. You don't have to do everything as one person, right? And maybe that's why that's why I do community work, is because that's something that I've been learning, and it's been a big thing for me. But it also reminds me of the way Central Park was created in New York. I remember at another community summit that I was at, maybe it was actually CMX a couple of years ago, there was a speaker that mentioned that there was this huge plot of land, and what the architects did, landscape architects, is they just watched and observed where did people naturally walk in Central Park, and naturally people would stop in a certain place near a lake or whatnot, and that's where they would decide to put a bench, or other places they would build a path. And so I really love this analogy. It's something that I share with our GDG community as well at different summits when I share on community best practices. It's just a great analogy of what you're saying, is watch where the community organically is going, and as community organizers, our job is to create the guardrails and the support to make sure that that flow is happening most effectively to serve the people that are in it.
Yeah, I love that story as well. I'm so glad you brought it up. And you see when that's done wrong, when you see like the beautifully manicured, sidewalks and hills in the park, but then you see just a mark in the grass where people have been walking through because they're like, no, this is not set up for me. So yeah,
or it looks beautiful and no one's there to enjoy it. Like for some reason it wasn't. It just wasn't the right spot.
So I want to take some questions from our community members, and if you have a question and you're out there watching, feel free to tweet at CMX, to use the hashtag CMXAMA, hashtag CMX Summit. We've got all the hashtags, or use the chat feature here in Google Hangouts Live. So our first question comes from the awesome Sherry Rohde, and she is wondering, you have this massive global community. How much traveling do you have to do for the job? And assuming there is a fair amount, any travel hacks you want to share?
That's actually a really great question. So luckily, because we do have regional leads that are the first point of contact on the ground, they're generally the people that go to local events or support local events on a regular basis. So the traveling that I do is usually for local organizer summits. So all the organizers, say in Brazil or in Europe, will come together for a summit that it's an event that Google puts on, and we help train them on community best practices, but it's also a place for us to simply appreciate them and to give them a celebration where they can meet other organizers and so on. So we try to have local summits in all of our various regions annually, or if not every other year, depending on the region and the resources that we have at that time. I'm unfortunately generally unable to attend all of them, but I would say probably like once a quarter at a minimum, I'm traveling and going to some part of the world for an organizer summit or even our own local team summits. I work very closely with Dan Frank, who's managing the Togethers with Google Developers program, which is kind of like a sister program to GDG's, which is a way for us to develop relationships with other developer communities that are outside of GDG. And he works out of the Prague office, and we also have a team in Zurich. So Prague and Zurich are places that are common for me to go to on a regular basis. So yeah, there's quite a bit of travel. Some times of the year more than others. In terms of travel hacks, what I would say, I mean, Airbnb has just been a lifesaver for me. Basically, Airbnb and then Uber are like the things that I use everywhere. Wherever I go, I found this really great spot in Prague, actually, and it had its own sauna in the apartment, which was great, and it was actually pretty cheap relative to all the other options. And yeah, so I would say the other piece of that, though, is not so much just like the technology piece, but how you go about your travel. Like, I do love to travel, and I love to explore cities, and I know there's certain things that I love to do in a city. So for example, when I went to Prague most recently, I thought, I really want to have a place where I need to cross a bridge to get to the Google office every morning, for example. And so knowing like what are the things that you love about travel, or the things that are really going to get you excited, and find a way to somehow incorporate that into whatever travel you're doing, even if you're only there for a day or two, and organize where you're staying and organize where you eat and everything, or you're having work meetings, with external people, find a way to work that in so you're having an experience that's not just achieving your goal there, but also giving you a more well-rounded experience. So, I think I use kind of the basic apps or the basic a technology that like other people use. Like I'll use like TripAdvisor, or like Yelp isn't always great everywhere, but I will use that to find some like local hotspots and whatnot. And also locals, like tap into the people that you know locally to give you tips on where to go, especially on places that aren't so much online, that are well reviewed online. And allow yourself a day to go on an adventure and just talk to people. So yeah.
I love those tips. Yeah, especially the orienting your trip around things you love, like the bridge thing. I'm like, oh, I totally want to do that now. I love walking over bridges.
Right? I just love walking around cities and bodies of water, and it's just super fun. So sometimes that can get disorienting, like if you don't know a city, but just check with the local people and kind of get a sense, and make sure to download your maps offline, because oftentimes I don't have like a local SIM card, and then so if I don't have Wi-Fi access, so offline maps is really helpful to get around.
Good Google Pro tips from the Google Pro.
Exactly.
Right, so we're almost out of time here. I want to get to a couple more questions, and then I will be sharing a small number of discounted tickets to CMX Summit, so everyone stay tuned. Our next question also comes from the community, and we've kept this person anonymous because they are currently employed, but they said, I would really love to hear Adriana's tips for getting hired in a community-facing role at Google.
That's so interesting. My own path to be where I am is kind of untraditional. So, yeah, you know what? I would say if you really love community, then just, put your intention out there, and I'm assuming that this person's already engaged somehow in community work, whether it's personal or professional. If you're not in a place where you're currently doing professional work around community, then find a way to get involved locally, and create opportunities for yourself where you can start bringing people together around a common cause or common purpose, and always look to what you're passionate about to do that, especially if it's something that's outside of a professional role, if it's something that you're trying to cultivate in your own life. So say you're really passionate about, like, I don't know, neoclassical film or something, just create a meetup group around it, right? And start bringing people together and start learning what it's like to be just learning and breathing the skill set of what it means to be an organizer in that way and being a people connector. And then in terms of, roles at Google, I mean, definitely check our website. There's always tons of roles out there. Essentially what we're looking for always are people just with good communication skills that are not afraid to kind of get up and, do a talk in front of a bunch of people, or really good at just bringing people together and that are self-starters and initiators. Community work, especially when you're working with volunteers and so on, it takes a lot of, the ability to get people motivated in doing something without paying them, right? I mean, that's really what GGs is all about, and that's something that I constantly am checking myself, like how can I be sure that I'm motivating my community as much as possible and I'm giving them the motivation, feeding their motivation, interest to stay as organizers, because it's always their choice. So those are certain skills that I think are really important to develop, and you can even develop them in your own life, with your own relationships and interactions, but just start thinking in that way, like how can I be someone that is an initiator, that's a kind of a fire starter, that kind of gets things moving and that persuades other people into action. And yeah, the role that I currently, have as a community manager is also a program manager. It's like a program manager ladder at Google. And so what that means is it's important for me to show proficiency in just project management and managing, spreadsheets of data and keeping things organized, like organizing chaos. And that's actually something I really love to do. And I can always become better at it, of course. But just try to find ways in which you are practicing those skills and that you can actively display them on a resume and in interview instances where you were able to organize chaos and lead people into action.
Great, love it. I want to squeeze one really quick answer in here because you mentioned this already, and then we will we'll call it a day and share that discount code. You mentioned motivating people to do things, and you have this massive program that is largely run by volunteers, and they're doing a lot of work. They're organizing events and getting people there and getting sponsors. How do you motivate them to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good question, right? And it's actually a study and something that we're constantly looking at, every quarter to kind of see how is our community doing, trying to get a pulse on community health and, organizer health and so on. What I think is really important is simply listening to your organizers, listening to your community, and allowing them the safety and the ability to have a channel of communication with you. The thing to completely avoid, which is kind of obvious, but is to get into a role where you feel like you are treating them as employees or that they somehow owe you something. Like that's like the complete opposite thing to do. So the opposite of that would be to actually treat them as though they are your customer, right? And really value and appreciate them for the work that they're doing. And I think that this perception of community leadership and organizers is really the key to everything else. If you have the right perception of how you're treating your community, then that's going to show itself and be reflected in the way that you communicate with them and the way that you're thinking about how to answer their needs or their questions, or even how you're approaching their feedback. It's going to impact the things that you do for them. For example, our summits that I mentioned. We have a global summit during I/O for all organizers that are in town for Google I/O, our Global Developer Conference, and also these local summits. So it's getting them involved. What do you want to see at these summits? How can we best support you? And making sure that they feel heard, and that when they do have feedback, even if it's something that you may not be able to act upon maybe immediately, let them know at least why, and have that equal relationship with them. Don't ever, as opposed to, I guess I'll say, having this hierarchical position where somehow you're telling them what to do or dictating. So if you have that sort of relationship, then I think everything else will follow. And then you just do whatever you can within your power to provide resources. We're given a certain limited budget, every year. We are given a limited amount of content from our product areas to provide content bundles for their events. Whatever those resources are, package them up and provide them with love and watch the garden blossom.
Yeah, amazing advice. Well, Adriana, thank you so much for doing this. I know we went a little over time, but I know it meant a lot for folks to hear from you. And
Absolutely.
thank you so much for speaking at CMX Summit.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I hope to see everybody there.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. So Adriana is speaking at CMX Summit on day 2, which is November 2nd. She will be speaking during the developer session, but we also have sessions on employee engagement, on support communities, on acquisition and retention communities. We have amazing keynotes from the co-founder of Reddit, from brain scientists, from some really amazing folks, and we haven't even announced them all yet. So I really hope we'll see you there. And we want to thank you for tuning in and being part of our community. So the next 10 people who use the code CMXAMA, very creative, will save 15% on their CMX Summit tickets. So head over to cmxhub.com, use that code CMXAMA. This is only good for the next 10 people, so you want to hurry. And even if you don't get that code, grab your tickets soon because they're selling out fast. And we would love to see you in November. Everyone, take care.